Today we're talking about 27 dresses. I have been desperate to talk about this. It's an iconic movie, one that I've revisited many times and rewatched throughout my teen years. And it is very fun, it's very romantic, it's your typical chick flick. So I wanted to talk about it today in this YouTube video because I rewatched it last week and I realized that there's a lot of really psychological parts of this movie I hadn't noticed before, to do with being a yes woman, a people pleaser, being unable to set boundaries, and also the whole stalker love trope that this movie unintentionally played into. It's a lot darker than you may initially have realized. So let's get into it. Jane Nichols is a classic yes woman, and so she has been obsessed with planning weddings from a young age and helping people make their weddings be as smooth sailing as possible, hence the title 27 dresses, 27 bridesmaids dresses. But she's always the planner and the organizer and never the bride. But she's that typical type A person, and I don't know why women in media or in general get hate for being that slightly uptight, organized type A boss, ambitious woman. I guess because they're harder to take advantage of and they seem like they've got their life in order and they're more organized, and so maybe they're intimidating to date. I have no idea, because I actually found it really cool and really attractive in a sense that she was so on top of it. But what's funny is, as the movie unfolds, you realize that it's not just a case of her being like capable. She finds it really hard to set boundaries and to say no to people. She's just like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'll help with your wedding. No problem. That's cool. You need me to drop the kids off? Yeah, sure. And she really struggles to say no. And so she wrestles with this idea of needing to support her younger sister, who is now dating and then going to marry the man that Jane herself loves. She's had a silent crush on him for years, her boss. But when her sister meets her boss, they immediately hit it off, and obviously there's no weird professionalism gap, so her sister just gets what she wants and they can start dating. There's no like ethical issue with them dating, and so Jane has to kind of silently stand by and plan the wedding because that's what she does, but her needs are going very much unvoiced and unmet. Now, when I was watching this, I realized that I'm sure a therapist, for example, I don't know if Cinema Therapy has watched this movie and reacted to it, but they need to, because a verified psychologist would have much to say about these unhealthy dynamics and basically how they create like a knock-on effect. And that's what I wanted to talk about today with my own knowledge, because someone like Jane is used to not really being taken care of, not used to necessarily having her needs met, maybe has some blockages to love. So she goes for someone who from the get-go is unavailable to her, her boss. Also ironic that he's her boss, because what does that involve? Doing things for him, helping him, being treated like just an assistant, and she's lucky to get a thank you, but that's kind of all she needs. She likes to feel validated, to know that she got his breakfast, she's on time, and she feels so happy when he says, oh, thanks, Jane, you're so organized. And she's like, oh, but that shouldn't be enough for her, because ultimately she's not getting her needs met. She's not getting the relationship she wants, and she's settling for basically, well, okay, we're not dating, but he thinks I'm a really great assistant, like he loves that I get his breakfast for him and his coffee just the way he likes it. Tess, her sister, is a fascinating one because she subverts a lot of the stereotypes we're used to seeing, because she's initially introduced as the shallow, girly, blonde bombshell, like the villain of the movie, who completely has no concept of how much damage she's causing to Jane. But whilst it would be very easy for them to just villainize her, they end up giving her a lot more depth and having actually a degree of empathy for her by the end of the movie that I found so incredibly surprising and refreshing, because I thought they were just going to villainize her and leave it at that. But no, Tess has her own arc in the movie as well, where she constantly feels just impressed by Jane because Jane has like this front of perfectionism. So she feels like she can never really live up to how organized and impressive her older sister is, and is jealous of her. But someone like Jane, who is an overgiver and who just organizes stuff perfectly, but doesn't really give herself rest and space and validation, she has no idea that people could be jealous of her. It never crosses her mind. The thought of her own sister being jealous of her is incomprehensible to her. But in many ways, Tess is, because she's like, how on earth could Jane be so impressive? And in a way, maybe Jane is jealous of Tess. Like, they're jealous of each other maybe without realizing. But Tess feels ultimately inferior. She doesn't feel like she's particularly smart or funny. Maybe she feels pretty, but that's kind of it. And so when she starts dating the boss, she starts lying about things, basically fabricating her entire personality to make herself a copy of her sister Jane, like a Jane 2.0, because down to even really worrying things like her diet, making out that she's not really a fan of meat when she does eat a lot of meat, and twisting her personality to try and mold herself into what he wants, because she doesn't think she'll be enough as she is. And obviously that really bothers Jane, because Jane's like, Tess, you guys are getting into a very serious relationship and he knows absolutely nothing about you. You're not giving him a chance to like you because you're lying. But a lot of this movie, what I love about it is it's not actually about the romance at all. A massive degree of it is also about the romance between, well, not the romance, oh my god, the connection, like the bromance, the sistermance. You know, it's about the connection between the two sisters and them learning to appreciate each other and their relationship, with the romantic part of it just taken out of it, because normally it's just about Kevin and Jane, and we'll get into Kevin in a moment, but it's about her and her sister ultimately, and them navigating that and trying to fix that wounded relationship. And it's about Jane also overcoming her people-pleasing tendencies and learning that it's okay and nothing bad will happen when you just say no bravely and you stand up when something doesn't feel right to you, so you don't put your own health and sanity in jeopardy every time. And the breaking point of the movie is actually when Tess is wanting to use their mum's old wedding dress, which Jane actually always wanted to wear. So she basically chops it up without consulting her sister, and she's like, oh look, and it doesn't even look the way that it looks before. Like, it's been completely modernized and chopped, and she saves some of the scraps for Jane. And that's the moment that Jane's really done, because she doesn't ask for enough, but the one thing that she does ask for is that she could wear her mum's wedding dress one day, and now it's been damaged. So she's basically like, nope, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not organizing your wedding. Like, I'm mad at you. And Tess is like, what? But like, you're my sister. What do you mean? And Jane's like, no, yesterday you were my sister. Today you're just some bitch who broke my heart and chopped up my mum's wedding dress. And I love that scene so much, because it's Jane basically redefining what it means to be a sister, and that she's not just obligated to give and give and give and give just because this is a blood relative. So let's get into Jane before we talk about her romance. She's a great character, and it becomes apparent that her need to control and organize things for other people really came from her issues with her dad and her issues with her mum, and not having very present parental figures. Like many overly generous people, she struggles to really be upfront about her feelings, or ask for things, or be thankful when people do nice things for her. And then people notice that and start to take advantage of that. And the problem is, when you're someone who's kind of chill like Jane, in the sense that you don't say, I want this, I want this, I want this, and you just do things for other people, is you don't claim your needs. And because she doesn't do that, people then notice it, they take advantage of it, and they then become shocked when she starts addressing her needs. If she was a bit more high maintenance from the start with, let's say, Kevin and with her sister, and a bit more like, I want this, I want that, and just complaining a bit more about things not being the way she wanted them to, making higher demands, people would know that she expected that. Whereas she puts up with so much and she asks for so little that it actually damages her. When Jane was younger, she got a lot of praise for helping out with a disaster at a wedding when there was something wrong with the bride's dress, and as a child it made her feel so seen and valued to have helped. So she equated that with helping people, helping them out gives me attention and love and that validation I've been craving. So she gets really excited and she's like, okay, she associates that with weddings and she's like, I'm going to help people with their weddings. Why did this happen? Well, she didn't get enough praise as a child with parents that were absent, and her feeling the need to like look after her younger sister Tess and parent her because the parents weren't doing that. So she was overly adultified from a young age, grew up too fast, and so when she did get some recognition with something, she felt really loved. And that then feeds into her workplace where her boss benefits from her being the most chill assistant ever who never says no, because he knows that he can hand over as many tasks as he wants and she'll do it for him. She's got this very like motherly presence where she's like, of course I'll do this, I'll do that, and I'm just really capable, I'm great at multitasking. And so he benefits from her having no boundaries. This is an objective truth that no matter how nice you are, how much you give, how kindly you phrase something, how much you clarify what you say because you don't want to step on any toes, that may not cause a drama, but it doesn't make someone fundamentally respect you. And it's funny then that George, her boss, and Kevin, her love interest, are both users, parasitic, who are selfish and take from her, because those are the kinds of relationships that she's cultivating. So if you boil it down to her, she reminds me a lot of Bonnie Bennett actually from the Vampire Diaries, just doing things for people. She's being a martyr, she's being a savior and a fixer and a helper, but nobody asked her to help. She's putting that all on herself. It's not like anybody said, Jane, do you have advice for my wedding? She just does it for them. This is a kind of child that's created from having very negligent parents, and it's crazy that such a seemingly simple, fluffy chick flick could have such like darkness to it. It's crazy. Someone like Jane takes too much responsibility and puts too much on herself in her work and in her relationships, which ultimately leads to her being in the movie very uptight and very highly strung. The problem is then you're rewarded for being a doormat, right? People are like, thank you, Jane, thanks for doing that. And so you feel good, you know it works, and so you keep doing it. It would be the same thing if Kevin had asked her in the movie to sleep with him on the first date and she was like, well, this will make him happy and create like a positive vibe between us, so I'll do it. If her boss says, do this extra task, she might be like, oh, okay, I'll do that. If her sister asks her to grab the bagel, she'll do it because she knows that she'll get a promotion, she'll be treated better. So she thinks that this will create positive change in her life, but it actually works against her. You know why? Because it builds to a growing resentment. Nobody is that nice. She'll start to feel annoyed, which ironically she does as the movie builds. And you know, this is the thing, this movie's so accurate, because I remember thinking, wow, I would be really resentful if that was me. I wonder if it will like burst at some point, because it will just be like under the surface the whole movie, which is exactly what happens. It's exactly what happens, and that's why this movie is amazing, because Jane's like smiling, pretending it's fine, while secretly being really annoyed. Oh, it's fine, don't worry, Tess, it's fine. Yeah, you can marry the love of my life. No worries, you can marry George. And smiling underneath, really bothered. Doesn't say anything, doesn't voice her needs because she's not used to that. So it builds, and it leads to her having a massive mental breakdown, like a massive outbreak in the worst possible situation. So because it builds up and up and up, she just sounds just so bitter and just crazy to other people, because she could have talked it out earlier rather than letting those feelings fester like that, which made her ultimately very emotional and very irrational. when they were having that kind of engagement celebration with George and Tess, her sister, and they wanted her to have prepared this little kind of photo album thing of the two of them and talk through, give a little speech to celebrate their engagement and lift them up as a couple. And that was the moment that she chose to basically have a breakdown. And this is exactly what happens for her, because she never took a backseat with anything. And so what happens is, in a way, she almost victimizes herself and is like, oh, I know that nobody asked me to help them, but I'm so sick of making sacrifices for them. I'm so sick of nobody asking me what I want. I'm so sick of not having any time for myself. But this is the issue, is it brings up a bit of a moral dilemma, because what she did at the wedding celebration engagement party was wrong. It was not okay. And I see many people saying, oh, like Tess didn't deserve that, or Tess did deserve that. I see mixed thoughts on it. Some saying Tess did deserve it because she was lying to George and someone needed to call her out and she was being a bitch. Yes and no. I don't think that public humiliation was the answer. You could have yelled at her in private and resolved it privately, or even gone to George and sat him down and said, right, George, Tess isn't going to tell you, so I am. Tess has been lying to you, George, the whole relationship, and it's not fair on you. You should know who you're going to marry. She could have spoken to maybe George's friends about it, even like his close friends, if they'd been lied to as well. But it didn't need to be like such a public, embarrassing scandal, embarrassing herself in the process as well in front of everyone at this engagement party. That for sure was uncalled for. It's also the way she did it. It was just like her best friend said. Her best friend pointed it out really, really well. And I love her friend, Casey, because she gently called Jane out and said, because Jane said, you're the one who's always telling me to stand up for myself. And Casey said, yeah, but that's not what you did. What you did was unleash 20 years of repressed feelings in one night. So this is a really interesting exploration in this movie of repressed feelings and what happens when you don't voice your needs. I love this movie. As you can probably tell, I love the best friend figure, Casey. I think she's amazing and all her points were so valid. She's got this really funny, dry humor and casualness to her that really contrasts beautifully with Jane's very uptight, structured personality. In a world where women are often expected to do the emotional labor, like in a relationship, for example, a marriage, they're expected to work and do 50-50 with the bills and look after the kids, which is unpaid labor, and also do all these other things that they don't get credit for, and be emotional support for their husbands, and also go to work. Like, it's so many things that they don't get recognition for, and it's proven in studies that women are naturally more capable than society gives us credit for. We just are really good at getting things done, and we actually naturally have very good leadership skills. We're really good leaders, like by default, but we're often implicitly expected to do more for those around us rather than being treated well. And in light of that, McKenna wrote the script based on her unnaturally selfless friend who had been a bridesmaid in 12 different weddings. So that kind of was the inspiration for this. And that's what I love about 27 Dresses, is it's not just a chick flick, it's not just a rom-com, it's a character study. And this is why Kevin is the worst character in this movie, because he's the most underdeveloped, because they actually neglected some of the male characters in this who they saw as less important because they didn't think it was as relevant. And that's my main hang up with this movie, is actually Kevin, because the actor who plays him is absolutely gorgeous. He was in The Notebook as well. I love this actor. He's wonderful. He does a great job. He's so charming and attractive and lovely, but even that doesn't make up for the fact that Kevin is not a good character. He seems incredibly nasty and creepy with the way that he worms his way into Jane's life to basically write an article about her and exploit her story for his own monetary gain and use her without being upfront with her about what he was doing. It was like some creepy ass undercover investigative journalism. I know that movies at this time really like romanticize the idea of being a bit of a stalker or manipulating someone into loving you, but it definitely has not aged well. He does everything he can to get Jane's story. Once he learns that she's a perpetual bridesmaid and never the bride, he's thinking, wait, I can imagine the story. I can imagine the photos of all her different bridesmaid dresses. What a weird woman. Like, she's crazy. Like, what kind of person does this? This would be a fascinating article. And so he does everything he can to like insert himself into her life, whether that's emailing her, filling out her diary with a date with him, coming to her apartment. It's a massive invasion of her privacy, and it's actually unforgivable. It's insane that she would forgive him and want to marry him at the end of the movie, because it's a terrible, and by the way, disrespectful way to start the relationship, because it shows that he thought of her as a bit of a joke, like a good story maybe, but nothing more. It's only when he spent more time with her that he genuinely like fell in love with her. And I know you could say, oh, but he had a crush on her from the first scene. He always found her attractive. Yeah, sure, like he definitely was always attracted to her and wanted some sort of romantic thing with her. But if that's the case, he should have found a different story. He didn't need to use her. Is he that short on ideas? And he makes excuses for his behavior, saying, no one reads that part of the paper anyway, my editor made me do it, and none of those excuses are acceptable. He was pretending to her that he was writing the article about her sister, Tess, and that the article would be about Tess, but it wasn't about Tess at all. It was about Jane. Especially considering what a nasty diva of a bride Tess was going to be, and that she was a liar. Not that it's right, but if he was going to pick someone to target negatively in an article and say mean things about, it should have been Tess, not Jane. Jane hadn't actually done anything wrong. All she'd been was a nice person who helped people with their weddings. And it's not like his article was like this really kind thing saying, wow, like, look at this amazing woman. She's been a bridesmaid 12 times. It was like a mockery of her. In fact, his article might have been illegal. It was complete with photos of her where her face was there unblurred, so everyone in the town can just make fun of her. And it's her real name, so it's no privacy for her either. There were other things that I liked about him. I liked how he said that she needs to learn how to say no and started trying to teach her to do that. And he said that she does so much for everyone and she deserves to be taken care of for once. And I agree with that. But if he feels that way about her, then why did he treat her that way? I realized after watching this that it's a story many people, and many women in particular, may resonate with, where they're just expected to do too much and too much is put on their plate and they're not ever feeling like it's equal or it's shared, like whether that's in their family, their friendships, their marriages. They feel like they're expected to do too much. They're expected to be like empathetic and to be, let's say, good wives or good friends, but then when something bad happens to them, nobody listens or nobody extends empathy, and many people would be able to see themselves in Jane. And it's really funny actually how when the movie came out, some people were saying that Jane was like too uptight and other people were saying that she was too passive, a character without enough agency. And that just shows again how women can never win, even in the reaction to the movie coming out, which is that they're nitpicking her personality and the way she behaves in the movie when there was literally nothing wrong with her. Even more ironic because the actress Katherine Heigl has been under so much scrutiny over the years. I don't know how much of it is accurate in terms of her being difficult to work with, but because she's been very outspoken about things, also like pay gaps and stuff, then she's labeled as too difficult to work with or a bitch, basically. And it's just really funny that then she's chosen to play a character like this. As McKenna told Decider, the core thing about this movie, which I always loved, is learning to stand up for yourself as a woman and say, no, I'm not going to extend myself and do this favor for you. And risking not being likable is something that women still struggle with. That to me was always the heart and soul of it. And I think that's something that continues to be relevant. And I completely agree. If you guys are interested, check out my next video. It's about Bridgerton and body shaming and expectations and beauty standards for women's bodies in the early 2000s chick flicks and rom-coms.